It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of Hashtag Event Icons, presented by Endless Events, the show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything. So, you might be wondering, how do you get to ask questions? All you have to do is use the question panel on the right of GoToWebinar to submit your questions. Or you can hop on Twitter to submit your questions with the hashtag EventIcons. We'll be answering your questions live during the entire show. Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better conversation we can have. So please help share hashtag EventIcons on Twitter and Facebook. Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com. Now, without any further delay, this is Hashtag Event Icons with your hosts, Will Curran of Endless Events, Laura Lopez of Social Tables, and Brant Kruger of Event Technology Consulting.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. I'm so excited, guys. It's Will Curran in the house. Laura is out for today, hanging out in the background, helping with the questions, and Brant is on site at an event. So you guys are stuck with me, unfortunately. But I luckily have two amazing guests to make up for it. I'm so excited. I want to get these guys introduced so we can jump in. One of them you're going to recognize, Mrs. Liz King, I should say, in the house. She is been actually a second time on the show now.
Oh, yeah, it's been 50 episodes, but I'm back.
50 episodes. She's back and ready in action. From what you remember from Liz, she is a event technology master. So we're super duper excited to have her back on the show. This time we're focusing on what she does on a day-to-day basis with TechsyTalk. So we'll get into that in just a minute, but I'm just so excited. Thank you again for joining us today, Liz.
Thank you for having me.
And in the house, first-time guest, but I feel like I've known this guy forever, Mr. Ed Wagaba. But he likes to be known as Ed Waffles.
Much easier for everybody.
Ed is the co-founder and chief unicorn, is that correct, of TechsyTalk?
Chief Unicorn.
I love it.
Correct.
And that just goes to show, shows the amazing personality you have that you're willing to call yourself the chief unicorn, so I love it. And the glasses and the t-shirt and the white headphones, I mean, it's just perfect.
You got a whole look going there.
He's got the look going. So Ed, I'm so excited to have you here today and join us for the first time on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm terrified.
Don't be terrified. We're going to have a lot of fun today. We're talking about TechsyTalk. If you haven't heard of TechsyTalk, they're like the go-to 100% leading name in event technology. Everything you need to know about cool tech. We were just talking about home automation stuff right before we got on. You got to definitely, if you don't already, subscribe to TechsyTalk. I'm a huge fan. I'm fangirling out a little bit right now. And that same shirt that Ed is wearing, I have one of those as well because I'm just such a huge fan. And unfortunately, you will not be able to buy those anymore because they're just so cool. They just were sold out.
Sold out.
So
I won't eBay mine though. So
I love it. All right, so I'm talking way too much. I want you guys to talk and tell your story. So let's kick it off. Liz, you've already been on the show, so I think everyone knows a little bit about your story. But can you tell everyone a little bit about what got you into the events industry, what got you kind of to today, and why did you start up TechsyTalk?
I just like to start things. I started Liz King Events to plan events. I thought that was something that I was really interested in doing. So I've been doing that for the past 8 or 9 years, I guess, and then started an event called Planner Tech, which evolved to TechsyTalk. And through that, we realized we could do a lot more with that platform than just an annual event. So we launched TechsyTalk.com. I'm a starter. I like to see where I think things need to go and start them. So that's kind of how we got started. I mean, obviously a longer story, but I'm sure most of you have heard that story at some point.
Let's go all the way back to episode 2 so they can get the full story, right?
And then listen to all the other episodes too while you're on your way back.
Yeah, exactly. And then watch all of them. Exactly.
Yeah.
I love your thinking, Liz. Awesome. And then Ed, how did you get linked up with Liz? What got you in the events industry? And this is your first ever public interview in the events industry. Is that correct?
First ever. I like to be the guy, the invisible guy, as much as I'm 6'1", 230 pounds. So I'm not.
And wearing bright sunglasses.
And we're right. But Liz is always, she's the master of the interviews and talking on stage and stuff. So I like to I like to not to be the non-celebrity, but managed to get me on here, so here I am. So some people might know this, a lot of people probably don't. I know Liz before the events industry, and we're friends of almost 13 years at this point.
Awesome.
And so we were together. We worked together in a nonprofit context for a church, and that was my first sort of like just dabbling in the events industry. I won't lie, I never dreamt about growing up to be an event professional, but working and organizing stuff for that church, it was just such a great experience working with Liz. And I think I've come to learn that finding somebody that you could really you have good chemistry with, good work chemistry with, and somebody that you can look up to and learn from. So when we reconnected probably 6 years ago, Liz had just started Liz King Events. I was transitioning. I was working in a completely different world before for a physical therapist, and it was just something that she'd started. But like my experience working with Liz was really good in that nonprofit context. That I was just like, yeah, I'll try this out. And initially, I actually wanted to do. I was interested in like videography and sort of like doing some documentation of the events, and it was just a very quick lunch interview, non-interview, and it was just kind of like, hey, I'm starting this thing as she does, and I sort of jumped in, and yeah, here we are 6 years later, and it's been a fun ride.
Time flies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Liz, like, true story, true story. So some people might have heard of TechsyTalk. Some of our listeners might not have heard of TechsyTalk. Let's start with Ed. How would you describe what TechsyTalk is and does?
So Liz might give a different account of this, but I think it's important to sort of talk about how TechsyTalk came about. So Liz King Events is the event planning company. We're event planners first. That's sort of like the primary hat we wear. We plan events for clients. And then we got into doing stuff for our peers in the industry. I think it was just, and this was an initiative Liz started, talking with other event planners, around different solutions. And Liz has always been like a tech person. So, she was always an early adopter with a lot of the event tech solutions that existed. And so TechsyTalk started off as something called Planner Tech, which was actually just an evening, 2-3 hour pitch fest. It was 10 companies would come up and pitch, and there was a lot of blogging that Liz was doing for Liz King Events. So as that sort of started to, the identity started to expand out of that, there needed to be a way to sort of create a space to share these ideas and these collaborative things that were going on in the event tech space, and just stuff with other planners that was separate from our identity of Liz King Events. And Planner Tech, the evening event, sort of morphed into TechsyTalk Live. And around that same time, we created the TechsyTalk.com platform, which really it was just an online way for us to have these conversations with other peers in the industry. And there was sort of a gap between event tech creators or companies creating solutions for event planners and the actual planners. They would make these great things, but planners either didn't know about them or just weren't gravitating towards them. So we sort of wanted to be a facilitator for how to merge those two worlds together. So our live event is sort of the one gathering that allows that to happen. But outside of that, we wanted to host all of those ideas and be able to showcase these things, because we know as planners that they're really useful for us, on TechsyTalk.com. And it's continually evolving. So it started around event tech, and that's why tech is in the name. But some of the blogs and the posts, and even if you attend the live event, a lot of it has changed, and it's around innovative ideas for event planners. So that was my long answer.
And I love it. I love it. Liz, like, did Ed miss anything? What would you say? Any other thoughts that you kind of want to add to that?
No, I think the only piece, it's not necessarily pertinent to the story, or how we got where we were, but I think just part of the evolution is that TechsyTalk actually became the hashtag for Planner Tech prior to it becoming the company name.
Cool.
It was just something that Ed came up with, and I remember sitting at the restaurant putting around names for like a cool hashtag because I didn't want to just do Planner Tech 2014 or whatever it was. And he came up with TechsyTalk, and I was like, no, that's not going to work. And then we stuck with it. And then after thinking about it, you realize, oh, okay, I think we could use that. We used it for the event, and it just stuck. And so we ended up launching the second company, TechsyTalk, from that because, like Ed said, we had to kind of differentiate. Our clients were coming to the site and seeing all this stuff for other planners and getting confused and vice versa. So it's just a way for us to split it up and make more sense for everyone, or at least we hope.
I love that you guys came up with the hashtag around dinner because it's the same thing with Endless. I actually didn't like the name Endless when we first came up with it. It was sitting around dinner, and I said, "Oh, Endless? No, I don't like that name. I like this other name I had in chart." But then it grows on you, right? So I love that that came together from a hashtag rather than just, hey, this is what the name's going to be. You know, also a big part of what you guys do, I mean, a huge endeavor that you do, is you guys actually have a podcast, TechsyTalk Unscripted, correct?
We do.
Awesome. And then can you tell us a little bit about like what got you? Because you guys are no stranger to the podcasting world too. You guys, how many episodes are you at right now?
Oh, I think we've got 25 or something.
See, that's like the like, oh my gosh, 25 episodes is when you're like, I can't not stop doing this now. I have to keep going. What made you guys want to start up a podcast and decide to go after that? You know, what kind of guests are you going after? You know, who are you featuring? You know, you want to talk a little bit about the podcast and kind of what your guys' plan is behind that? Go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, you know, we launched the podcast because I think it's a format that people really like. We generate content in blog format and tweets and all of that stuff on a regular basis. And over time, we started thinking a lot of people enjoy listening to podcasts. And so we run into so many interesting people in the industry. We have lots of great conversations over coffee or, you know, over dinner or over drinks. And you realize that none of this stuff is getting captured. It's just floating between 3 people or 5 people, and then it's gone. And so it was just the idea of kind of getting those stories behind, like all the industry jargon is kind of out there. We can publish tons of articles on best practices for X, Y, and Z. But what about like the people in our industry? Everyone has really interesting stories. Most of the people in our industry are really creative. A lot of people do more than just event planning, like ourselves. You know, we kind of get involved in lots of different things. And so our unscripted podcast is really about getting to know the people behind the brands and the products and the companies that most people see and hear about on a regular basis.
Awesome, I love it. And Ed, I mean, you consider yourself to be kind of the quiet behind the scenes guy. You know, like, do you get to host it all? You get to be a part of the podcast, right?
Yeah, I mean, so for the episodes, it's sort of like, you know, I think sort of what you and Laura will do. Well, we're both on screen and asking questions. And that, again, was, I still to this day don't know how Liz convinced me. She's probably asked 1,000 times, and I've resisted to the death because I don't like to be sort of at the forefront. But I am part of it, and like Liz said, you know, we'll be at the live events, and when we're not hosting the event, I have some really great conversations with the other event professionals. And yes, some of it is shop talk, but I think there's a lot of great stories about the people that we you know come into contact with and we're out in the field with, that you just have, you know, sort of these water cooler conversations. So, and she, you know, Liz will tell you I'm a junkie for interviews and just, you know, podcasts. Like I love to, you know, to take that because I love to hear people's stories. So that's sort of, you know, I think that's what allowed me to say, all right, I'll be involved, because it wasn't, you know, we weren't going to get on there and necessarily talk best industry practices. You know, I want to know about, like, you know, why somebody started and, you know, failure stories and, you know, just the kind of things that we enjoy talking about in person. So yeah, I'm fully involved in that capacity.
And I definitely love the format because I think it mirrors, has a little similarity to that unscripted nature to like to the Event Icon show that we're, you know, you're trying to keep it more casual and, yeah, like you said, not scripted and boring. You know, if so, you know, obviously, you know, there's 25 episodes out there. Where would you say that you like? What's your favorite episode that you would say, okay, if you're gonna start somewhere, you got to listen to this one episode? What was your favorite episode so far? I know that's a really hard question. That's like asking who your favorite child is.
Liz, I'll let you take that one.
Oh, I'm going on our website actually to look. I would say generally the best episodes to me are the ones where we barely talk about events, because I think there are so many really interesting people in the industry who are doing just tons of things. I like when we get off topic. One that definitely comes to mind is we interviewed Lauren Goldberg, who works with AFR Furniture Rentals. But who knows that she throws these amazing birthday parties for herself every year that are super themed, and they bring in, all different kinds of people, and it's a total personal project of hers. It's obviously related to the industry, but those are the fun conversations that episode I specifically remember thinking like, oh my God, are we out of time? Because it flew by. I think that's where we really have a lot of fun. It's event related, but it's just you get into so much more than just what we see in typical blog interviews or other formats like that.
Absolutely. I love it. They breaking the shell a little bit. I love
Exactly.
it. Awesome. Ed, what about you? Do you have a favorite episode?
I can't say that there's a favorite because each one I feel like I've walked away, with gems or just something I didn't know. There's definitely a lot of memorable ones, and this is sort of without even looking. Um, Michael Radolinski, who's from FedPhone, and shameless plug, he is going to be one of the speakers at TechsyTalk Live. And the reason why is because we had this unscripted with him, and it was just so good. And I just remember, the guy who I'd never heard of, and it was a name that sort of got sent to us through, somebody else. And matter of fact, I think I recommended to you guys to talk to him. He's just a guy with such a great story, and it was just like, one of those rich conversations. Kristen Tomlin from, I want to pronounce it right, Dough NYC, who they make edible cookie dough. And they've actually they started a storefront out here, which has been circulating all through, the different periodicals. But outside of the phenomenon of what she's doing, in terms of catering in the industry, she just had such a fantastic story, which, to be honest, I don't know in how many interviews that part of her story had come out. It's just something we sort of stumbled on in those 5 minutes before we went on air. So, it was things like that. I think that's one of those moments I'm like, well, this is what we do it for. And she was happy. It was a very intimate story about, being sick and how the business came to be. So, I mean, that's one of those I'd recommend people to go look at there, not to pat ourselves on the back. I think they were all very rich episodes in terms of things that you could learn about the people.
Awesome. I mean, it seems like, yeah, the thing in common that you guys both touched on is, it's about the story. And that's, I think, probably what makes your guys' podcast so unique, too, is that, yeah, you're diving into people's story. And, you might hear yourself, you might be scanning through the episodes and you just think, oh, cookie dough lady, I don't want to listen to that one. But then, yeah, that's one of your favorite episodes. And it was because of the story. So, awesome. Well, you guys are, very huge, you guys are such influencers in the industry, and you guys are trying to stay on top of, tech trends, which are literally changing as we speak. Do you guys have any resources that you use that you recommend that you're watching to stay on the pulse of event tech, whether it's event related or not, where are your sources? Where should people go to find out more about event tech?
I would jump in and say that I think there's obviously really great industry resources. Event Manager blog is one that always comes to mind. But for me, I think the biggest thing is being a user of technology, and I'm watching a lot of the publications and things that are happening outside of the event space. I still go to Mashable all the time as just a general tech resource, and I think just generally being tuned into technology news, what's happening with Apple, what's happening with Google, what's happening with smart homes. I think that there's no way you could tell me that, what's happening with, we were talking before we went on air with Ring doorbells. There are implications for the events industry with all of this technology. And I think you just have to have an open mind to see maybe it's not all affecting our industry right now, but I think if you're using it and you're staying up to date on what's happening generally with technology, you can start to see the trends. I think that's where we all need to be, is predicting kind of what the next big thing is.
I love it. Ed, what about you? Any sources or places that you're constantly watching for event tech changes?
To be honest, Liz is is my primary. Liz is admittedly, the event tech guru, and again, when she started this company, I knew it sort of flowed naturally for her. I am not probably as ironically, I'm not as much of a tech geek. Although, I do appreciate. Say what?
Are you calling
Yeah, you wear it proudly.
Be proud.
But I feel like more so in just terms of like innovative ideas, and there are like some of the blogs that she mentioned that are within the industry, but like I'm still somebody, I love looking at Fast Company because I feel like they do touch on things that overlap with our industry, but they also just touch on ideas because I think a lot of the thinking and just the things that kind of blow my mind don't necessarily come from our industry, even though you find applications that work out for the industry. But I think it's just the way that it gets you to think. So I probably look at more non-industry publications or periodicals than I do industry ones. But then, it's also going to the events, and some events are industry events, some events are non-industry events. Like Heineken might do something, and it's technically an event, but it's not like an industry association event. And you'll see something there, and it sort of gets you going. And I feel like that's what TechsyTalk Live tends to be. Just a whole gumbo of all these ideas that we sort of come across.
Awesome. I definitely agree with taking, outside the industry is always the best because then you can figure out a way to apply it and no one else is doing it. Do you guys have any like favorite pieces of technology that you're like Googling and gagaing out? I mean, we talked about home tech on our way in here, webcam covers, for example. Is there any piece of technology that you're like, man, this is my favorite thing right now? Every video that comes out on YouTube about it, I'm watching, anything like that? Even could be a category. Ed, how about you?
I don't
Vacuums.
know. Vacuums? No. If that counts, yeah, as you saw, I sort of like moved it out of the way, but I am definitely into the Dyson vacuum cleaner. I don't know if you guys ever used it, but the suction on a Dyson vacuum cleaner is unmatched, and Liz will argue this, but I am faithful. Again, this is probably not going to use this at your event, but if you are going to use a vacuum cleaner at your event, use a Dyson.
I love it. I love it.
I can't think of any other tech. It might come to me, but Liz, if you have.
Yeah, go ahead, Liz.
Well, I am just generally interested in all this smart home stuff, just seeing how it all integrates. And I have a personal interest in photography, so I'm super interested in drones and selfie cameras and anything photo related, whether it's printing or the actual photography. And there's so many things for events that I think are really cool. And then generally, I guess the other thing that is very interesting to me these days is second screen technology. Doing a lot of research on.
And what's second screen?
So the idea that you're like watching a TV show and then at the same time you're on your iPad on your couch and they give you like a hashtag to use so you're following along on Twitter, or they have an app and so there's like a game that you're playing while you're kind of watching the show. And I think that has huge implications for the events industry, especially when it comes to content. People are tired of sitting in a chair for 9 hours in a day, staring at a tape, at a stage with a speaker on it. And I think there's just really cool ways that we can engage people using the device in front of them, and get them to, really hear the content instead of zone out and do Facebook or whatever else is fun.
Well, I think like Slido is a great example of that, right? That they and CrowdMics, right? They talked about they're using your phone in addition to what's going on stage and engaging in it, and they can use things like chat and Q&A and polling and things like that. So I definitely that's a super duper solid point. Awesome, I love.
Can I jump in with a quick sort of just question or so? And I don't have any research on this, but I was just thinking about this the other day because I. Probably like a lot of people have the tendency of, bless you, of watching TV. I'm one of those rare tri-state people that actually has a physical TV, as most of us watch stuff off the computer. But I'll watch TV and have either my phone or my laptop open, so I'm doing both simultaneously. And the other day, I can't remember a movie I finished watching, and I was wondering, I was like, I don't know how much of the movie I actually took in. And again, this might just be my own inability to multitask and absorb information at that point. So as you know, as Liz is talking about this, and it is very exciting to see. I think Facebook just rolled out where you can scroll the feed and the video will stay, which YouTube has done for a while. Yeah. So I was excited to see that because I know, like, you know, just as a user, that's been something I'm like, oh, but I want to keep doing this, but listen or watch this. But it would be interesting to see what the information says about how we're actually taking in information, which is going to impact, you know, what we see in the industry. So, like, our ability to engage using something and something else going on stage, at the end, will people have learned more? They might have engaged more, but have they learned more and take away more? Anyways, as you guys were mentioning these things, I'm just like, I wonder where that's going to land, right?
Well, I think people like naturally like to multitask, and they like that. Like you said, you see that on Facebook and you get excited. You're like, ooh, now I can watch a video and do something else, even if you're doing a horrible job of doing those two things. But the idea from the event standpoint is, how can we leverage and coordinate both of those things so that they complement each other and they don't distract from one another? One platform I'm currently obsessed with that we're using at TechsyTalk Live is Glisser. And it allows you to look at like the slides of what's happening on stage, but to interact with them. You can vote them up and down. You can ask questions and vote those questions up or down. You can take notes on those slides. So rather than using your iPad for like Facebook or email, you're engaging with the content, which I think does help you learn that content more. But it's the idea of, like, you know, especially at TechsyTalk Live, I've seen pictures from the back of the room and literally everyone has a device open. And I always like zoom in. I'm trying to see what they're, you know, what is each computer open to while we're giving all this great content on stage. And I think it's an interesting challenge for event planners to figure out how to use that second screen to our advantage and not like have it losing everyone's attention.
Awesome. I love it. I mean, definitely, if anyone's interested in Glisser, we had them on the show, gosh, 20 episodes probably ago. And definitely Mike Pick is a brilliant man. I love what they're doing over at Glisser as well. So definitely take a look at that. I think you guys bring up a really good point, though, about the idea of like multitasking. You know, they say that the word multitasking actually came from when computers were first created, and actually it's just fast task switching. And apparently, like the human brain actually can't do two things at once, right? Like you try to pat your belly and rub it, you know, whatever. At the same time, I can't even say what to do. But you know, I think that's a really, really good point that planners need to take into is, you know, cool, this event tech is great, but does it provide, is it helping the learning or is it causing a distraction? And obviously, like Ed, you were saying, unless you measure the data on it, we're not going to know. So, but, you know, the gut feeling is that it is. So, fantastic stuff. So I'm curious to know, we kind of talked a little bit about it. And, you know, people are kind of probably now curious, like, I hear all about this TechsyTalk Live. Can you talk a little bit about, like, when does the event happen? What, you know, where does it happen? You guys are really, I think, really interesting concept that we were talking about before the show is that you purposely keep it small versus it becoming another, you know, IMEX with thousands of attendees or, you know, massive trade show booths. You keep it purposely small and intimate. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, what goes on during the conference, what sort of stuff people can look forward to as far as content? Ed, that's all you.
For those who are not familiar with TechsyTalk Live, which is sort of our live manifestation of what happens on the TechsyTalk.com platform, as I'd mentioned previously, TechsyTalk Live used to be Planner Tech, which was 10 companies would get up there and do a fast pitch, and this was just our way of taking the event tech that existed and getting a room full of planners together for them to even know that it exists, learn about it, and engage after. And I feel like maybe 5 or 6 in, we started to feel like it was really cool for them to learn about the existence of this event tech, and everybody, you know, would be, you know, have their minds blown. But the actual application of it was a bit of a challenge, and you know, we'd hear that feedback also from the event tech companies. So we then morphed it into, expanded into a full-day conference. So it was a full day of programming, which it currently is, and you know, from 9 a.m. till maybe like 5 p.m. And it's, I think, our favorite event to plan because, you know, different from like a client event where we have parameters, you know, certain restrictions, and, you know, for the most part, it's their vision that we execute on. This is something that we, from start to finish, plan, and we get to use a collaborative resources of the companies that are involved. We get to feel out what the industry, what are some of the things we're challenged with, some of the problems that we have other planners ask us, and create the program around that. So I guess one of the unique things about it is that we are planners first and foremost, and not to knock any other events that exist, any other live events, but sometimes events are put on by not necessarily like planners apart from the event that they're planning. So that's why we sort of we look at the event as, and having attended a lot of events, how what we would like to see, and we try to create that vision and make it live. And we get a lot of inbound requests of event tech companies and other solution-based event companies that want to sort of get feedback from planners. And so we get first looks, and then we sort of filter through that and figure out who we can get on stage, so that the event planners can come and be as excited or as informed as we are when we first see it. So that's sort of what TechsyTalk Live is an event, and I'll let Liz elaborate a little bit more on particularly a change that I guess we made this year with how we're laying it out.
New news. So yeah, the event is June 2nd this year, and this is our 9th event, which is like shocking to me because I feel like we just launched it not that long ago. And every year we try to change things up and do something new. And again, we look at where we feel like the industry is going, and we try to curate an event that really meets a planner's needs for the coming year. So by June 2nd, we're looking at what are people going to need to know for 2017 and 2018. This year, kind of the big change is that we're focusing more on the full event experience. And this is actually something that we've been doing. It's something that we have been doing for many years, but we've never really drawn attention to it. And I realized that's something that we're not that great at. So we like to do really interesting things, and then we kind of take for granted that this is not stuff that other people realize they should be doing. Little things like we've always, for the past several years, we've had a DJ live on site on the stage like Ellen has on her TV show that introduces all the guests, has music in between. We do things like, instead of coffee breaks, we do entertainment breaks, so people can go use the restroom and eat whenever they want. There's food and drinks available all day, but their minds do need to rest. But instead of losing them to a coffee break in the hallway and then you have to get everyone back in the same room, we've done things like improv, we've had music entertainment, we've had all different kinds of entertainment. So this stuff is stuff we've always done. We've never really made a big deal about it, but this year we're taking a bigger step to really talk about all of that. So event technology is, of course, a huge component of how you create a really great event, but we're working with AFR Furniture to do really interesting things with the seating arrangements. We have some partnerships with companies like Storms that do really interesting facilitation techniques. So we'll be using iPads to collect feedback and the attendees can work in small groups so we can get feedback, and then from there we can collect that feedback and make decisions about that. And so we're talking about the full experience, lighting, the mobile apps that you might use, the facilitation techniques, the seating arrangements. So I think it's going to be a really great event. Like Ed said, we really try to use this as our playground. We think of things that we think our clients should be doing, and a lot of times we'll tell our client, like, hey, do this, and they're like, yeah, that's a bad idea. Okay. So we do it for ourselves, and then we prove that it works, and then we take it back to the clients. We're like, this is what we need to be doing.
That's amazing. I was gonna say, I literally love that. It's kind of like you're at a scratch pad, the chance to experiment, try new things. But I think it's almost amazing from a business perspective too, that you said that you're trying these things out, so then you can prove them to your clients. Like, hey, we did this before.
Yeah.
Is that what's that like? I mean, a lot of us are planners. We're kind of given, for lack of a better term, a box or client. Even if they say think completely outside the box, you're still like, there's obviously I can't go too crazy with this. What's it like? Is it ever scary when you're implementing this new technology? I don't know if this is going to work, or is it exciting? Well, what's that like, getting to be able to build your own kind of playground of an event?
It's a lot of pressure. I mean, who wants to plan an event for other event planners? Talk about the most critical audience in the world. They come and we're paying attention to everything from the second they walk in the door, their registration process, all the way until the time they leave, the food we give, the drinks that we give, the venue, the technology. I mean, you're coming to a tech event. If there's a problem with the Wi-Fi, we're going to have problems. People are going to be complaining. Thank God we've never had huge issues on social media or something, but we definitely take that risk every year, and we take that pretty seriously. But and honestly, a lot of times people will come up to us at the end of the event and they'll be like, "Oh, so what did you think?" We're like, "I don't know. You tell us," because we were behind the scenes running the whole thing the whole time. So we don't always get to see what it's like. We don't get to always see it in action the same way an attendee would get to see it. But I think that I think maybe our ideas are just innovative enough that we tend to engage the audience really well every year, and people come back, which is always a good sign. It's a lot of pressure, but we really like it. I think every year I'm like, pretty much every year I tell Ed, I don't know if we could do that again. Maybe there's not going to be enough more innovative stuff, or maybe, you know, I can always come up with a reason, but Ed always holds me to the fire and we get it done.
So I just wanted a quick mention, which it is important to mention because I feel like it's part of the secret sauce and also what gives us the luxury of experimentation. Liz mentioned, or not necessarily by name, but Convene is who we're partnered up with, and we've been using them. It's an incredible, I want to call it a space, but they have so many now and they're expanding all over the country. But Convene is such an important partner for TechsyTalk Live for us because just I don't know if you've ever been to their venue, but the way they're built and the way they think about their venue matches our philosophy in terms of like innovation and just like an incredible user experience. And it was just a fortunate partnership that worked out for us. But you know, if you're talking about reliable Wi-Fi, that's never a thought. You know, in terms of something that we'll have to deal with. An in-house staff that's attentive, and it gives us sort of the room to focus on the thing that we're doing. We're not worried about some of the more trivial but important things that I think we've experienced, maybe doing a client event elsewhere. So they sort of like create this stage, and again, I just thought it was important to mention them as part of the TechsyTalk Live picture in terms of what we're doing. And you know, it's a thing that attendees can come there and feel great the whole day because they have, you know, really expensive seats that that they thought through. The way they create their menu is something that would allow us to have people in their seats for X amount of time, and they'll feel energetic. So all these things, which you might not, it's not like we put posters of these when you walk into the event, but these are things that we're factored in and we're well aware of, that it's a game changer for us in terms of planning TechsyTalk Live.
Awesome. I absolutely huge fan of Convene as well. We also had them on the show. I always feel like I have to plug old episodes. I had them on the show like 15 or so episodes ago, and we actually had them on with Marriott as well. So it was very interesting to see the dynamic between a traditional venue like we talked about that we're used to working in, and yeah, like Convene, who's kind of new age, front facing, let's do things differently. You guys talked a little bit about what you've done, in past years, and you actually started to tease a little bit about what to look forward for this year. What can people look forward to this year that you guys are going to implement? Anything exclusive you can share with the Event Icons listeners?
Ed, that's all you.
I don't know. Got me off guard. I have to.
There's so much excitingness with it.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing is, one of the way we rethink the event year to year, it's not always so much like a big dramatic change. I mean, sometimes there's like like we had like a very interesting installation where people walked through and it felt like they were walking through a hologram. Like, we might have something like that where it's just something you'll experience. But I feel like year to year, it's always like these little 1% tweaks, It's just these little bits that we tweak, and then when you experience the event, it feels very different from the year before. So maybe let me think on that. I might come up with something by the end of the episode and also I will say this, because it's 3 months out, for example, what I just mentioned, that didn't come about the year we did it until maybe the last week and before. So we might need a post TechsyTalk Live episode to be able to, We had a Tupac hologram. Who knew?
I love it. I love it. No, that's definitely awesome, and I think that's. I mean, you're in the day. You like you said, 3 months out. So much stuff can change from between now and then. So it's that's what shows how flexible and great planners you are that you're able to say, hey, let's take this technology. Hey, we're going to experiment with it. It might not work, but hey, we're going to figure out a way to make this work. And I think that goes very, very far. You guys started to talk a little bit about, obviously through List King events, you're planning events for tons of other people, and a lot of times you're experimenting with TechsyTalk Live and then implementing it for your clients. Is there any favorite tech tools that you guys have been using for every single one of your events that you're like, for example, well, let's see, Anthony from FMAV is in the audience, and he said, I love Glisser too. We're using it at all of our events. We use it all across Canada. Like, it is our go-to, like, staple technology. Do you guys have any technologies that you guys are using that you couldn't live without?
Bizzabo. We love them. And I find that Bizzabo is one of those technologies that's very easy to, or at least easier to convince our clients to use, because the price point is right and the services are really above and beyond what you would get from a traditional like registration platform, because they do have, I mean, we plan a lot of conferences, so I should say that, because that's obviously the right target market for that platform. And so a lot of our clients are having 5,000 different Excel sheets to track speakers and sponsors and exhibitors and different level sponsors, and you guys have all seen them. And so to be able to do the majority of that management through a single platform, we've had some of our most, what's a nice way to say cheap clients.
Frugal.
Inexpensive.
Yes, our most frugal clients even say yes.
Awesome. I love it. Ed, what about you? Any
also say Luminous. Sorry. So this is somewhat event tech, but I think it's more on the aesthetic level. There's Dennis Finnegan from Luminescence Uplighting, and I feel like if ever it's in a client's budget and they want to make a room, sort of like make a room pop, they're always our go-to. Just super reliable, and like that you can tell by the end result. And also, I mean, they do other audio, what do you call it? They do other AV related work, but I feel like if I'm thinking back to most of the conferences that we've done, we've incorporated them majority of the time, and you always see them at TechsyTalk Live. It's a difference maker in how you feel in the room.
Very cool. Very cool. I definitely I'm gonna have to definitely check out Luminescence. Awesome. I'm an AV guy, so naturally I'm really excited always about finding out about other awesome AV companies. We have a great, oh man, the questions are starting to flood in from the audience. With the work that you guys are doing with planners, sometimes you, like you said, they're frugal. What would you say is something that drives you crazy that planners do that you wish they would stop doing?
Oh. Can I
Liz.
That's from the audience.
Liz.
Paper registration, or really anything, like registration is such an important component of an event. So many people mess it up. I can't tell you how many times I've walked out of an event just because I won't wait in a 9-hour line for nothing. Like, if you spent the time to register, you should be able to get in. I think that's like the most basic part of an event. I think it was 2008, I predicted that paper registration was going to go away, and I am so wrong, and it's so bad. I don't know how people are still doing check-in and pre-printed badges that you're sorting, like, we have clients, they have 1,000 attendees, and we're sorting through thousands of name badges to find a single user to hand it to them, and half the time you realize that 90% of those people didn't show up, and 7,000 new people showed up that weren't on the list in the first place. So you're wasting badges, and I just think the whole registration process, I can't tell you how many events I go to designed for event planners that have horrible registration process. Clearly it's something that bothers me.
So let's not talk about paper registration
Let's
anymore.
not talk about paper.
Ed, what about you? What sort of stuff grinds your gears?
So Liz and I have had many conversations about that, and I feel like we both share that as a major pet peeve. But so attending, sort of more formal conferences, or even just like I love to nightlife a lot and go to different nightlife stuff. I feel like there's just a general apathy about user or attendee experience, and I get it. Depending on what the setup is and how much, how intimate it is, or just, some of them are just much bigger productions. I'm always either blown away, or I'm very sensitive to, like, when you go to an event and it just seems like such a drag. You might, it might be a concert, or it might be, and it's just like, oh, all these things you have to go through, and it feels like the people who put on the event never really took into consideration. And maybe that's just because when we're planning TechsyTalk Live, which we have, complete dominion over, that is something that we think about, from looking at the venue and like how people line up the stairs and the registration, people sitting in the seats, accessibility of bathrooms, cleanliness of bathrooms. It's like all these little things that I think we're very sensitive about and very meticulous about, which leads me when I go to other events to sort of, silently judge, or like, if somebody does it really well, I might even text Liz at 2 in the morning from a club and tell her about something cool that like really, just happened. So, yeah, I feel like it's more of those things. It's just you can sort of get a sense about the people who plan the event and the people who are on site executing the event, because some events leave you feeling like I would never pay to go to that again, and some leave you inspired and thinking like, oh, I needed to do that, at our upcoming event.
Well, speaking of problems that need fixing, we have another awesome question coming in from Twitter, and they are asking, what's a problem in the events industry that is ready to be fixed with event tech? Like, obviously, paper registration, but is there anything else that you're like, man, this has been solved. This event technology could totally fix this.
Someone's looking for a business idea. There's so many things that should be solved. I think name badges is an interesting one. I think it's one of the most commonly Googled things. What's new with name badges? And then you look and you're like, oh, nothing's new. They're still exactly the same. I think like the most innovative thing that's happened to name badges in the past decade is QR codes, which died very quickly. And I think it's, people attend events for content and networking. We've all heard that. If the networking is horrible, then, how are you achieving that main goal? So I know that there's other things you can do through the mobile app, and there are technologies that support. But I just think that's like a very simple thing that technology could be doing. And I don't mean, a digital badge that lights up different colors. Don't be so cynical.
Don't name any companies.
We need to change the subject from registration, apparently.
So, well, I've got one which obviously Liz will know, and we were interested in figuring out a solution for this, but we sort of shelved it. So say what? Yeah, we'll open it up to where. Honestly, if somebody's listening and they can take this and run with it and solve it, we would be happy as event planners to support. So there are companies that list venues. So if you're in Chicago, New York, wherever, you want to find a venue based on what the client's budget is, the amount of people for the event. There are companies that do it, but we don't feel still that anybody is doing it really, really well in terms of just the ease and the accuracy with which you can source a venue with minimal need. I mean, I think as event planners, we're always going to want to walk. If you're worth your salt, you're going to want to actually do a walkthrough. But I think the technology is at a point now where you can walk through a venue using the 3D imaging and the thing that Google even does. You can actually walk through venues with fairly good layouts and eliminate a lot of the venues that you're looking for. And I feel like of the platforms that are out there, it's still such a, like, the default now is still for somebody to say, hey, does anyone know about a venue with these parameters? And it's just still a very, like, on Facebook, sort of word of mouth, which it's a strange thing to us, like, in 2017, that there's not a much easier way for somebody locally or somebody elsewhere to be able to minimize how many venues they're actually going to take the time out of their schedule to go look at. Right, there are companies that do it and they list it, but it's very clunky still, and it still leaves us sort of like going with either recommendations of what people have told us or things that we've used in the past. And I feel like it shouldn't have to be, because we run into venues which were sort of like unknown to us before, and they just have sort of missed that that layer. So I feel like that's something which the technology that's becoming a little bit more inexpensive for people to incorporate it either on websites and solutions. And I think maybe something I just thought up in the shower the other day, I think maybe the big VR headsets, that might be an application for it. If you could sort of load all these venues and do a very intense walkthrough using a headset, I feel like that's something planners might consider investing in and not having to drive to somewhere or. So anyways, it's around the venue search, which is still, I think, a gaping hole for most planners. It's such a time suck. And also just dealing with the venues when you get there, you're like, man, a lot of this could have been answered on the phone.
Yeah, right. Awesome. I will 100% agree with that for sure. I definitely, if someone solves that, I think we're all willing and able to take our money now. So we have only a couple minutes left, so I think we're going to do like a speed fire round on these last two questions before we get into our last two questions that we have. So we'll start with the more complicated question. Anthony from FMAV in the audience live right now asks, how do you convince apprehensive tech-wary managers and planners to embrace technology that is outside their comfort zone? Again, how do you convince apprehensive tech-wary managers and planners to embrace technology outside their comfort zone? We only have a couple minutes left, so if you have a quick thought around that, I think they'd love to hear.
I think it's about thinking outside of the technology. I mean, I think we're so sold on pitching a particular technology, but I think, like anything, you've got to market the problem that it solves. So if a particular technology is going to help a client do something that they've never been able to do before, or it's going to dramatically limit the number of hours that they spend doing something that they always do, I think focusing on those business goals and also thinking about how you can test technology on an inexpensive and small scale with that client. I find that typically takes 3 times for me to get a client to really do whatever it is I want them to do. The first year they say no. The second event they're like, okay, maybe something cheap and easy. And then they see it and they're like, oh, okay, yes, we'll do it. But I think you have to sell them on it, and then you've got to give them like something to test, whether it's data that you have from another event or a sample they can do pre-event, or maybe it's just for that one event, you kind of do it a little more simply.
Awesome. Ed, any other added thoughts?
No, I think Liz covered.
Crushed it. Awesome.
Well, yeah.
Anthony on the audience says, Liz is so smart. Thank you.
She is.
Awesome. So last question I have before we jump on our last two final questions. Do you have any predictions for event tech this year? A hot app, an awesome event that everyone should attend, or a trailblazer that you think everyone should be paying attention to?
TechsyTalk Live.
Boom! Drop the mic. I love it. I love it. All right, cool. Well, that's totally cool with me. You guys want to do that? Cool. Yeah, and to be honest,
do for an encore? I don't know.
I think that's a good answer, to be honest, though, because you guys feature all the technologies that you want to have that are trailblazing. So it's like, like we could sit here and we listed a ton of them already, but if you want to list out all of them, we'd probably be here for like a while, because you guys are obviously staying on the leading bunch. So everyone go to TechsyTalk Live. That's a great answer to that question, actually. All right, cool.
In the past, we have had someone Liz has done 50, like a rapid fire 50 technology. I can't remember what it was called, but she went through 50 different technologies, and we've had it at least twice, and it might happen again this year. So whoever wants to learn, come check it out.
Buy your tickets now. All right. So on to our last two final questions that we always ask. If you could pick one tip that you have for event planners today that would make their event planning process easier or make their events 100 times better, what would be your one tip that you would give to event planners today? Ed, you want to go ahead?
One tip. Well, the thing is, it's sort of it's important to me. I don't know if it's something that if it's either who you are or who you're not. But I think what's been important in our brand has been integrity, and there's a cost that comes to that. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's but I think it's just to plan an event, and whether you're thinking about the client. So there's some shady practices that happen from event planner to client. There's a lot of sometimes the actual attendees who pay to show up to these events are an afterthought and just sort of like a means to a bottom line. But I feel like we've made some really hard decisions in the course of our time that have had their own consequences financially. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're doing right by everybody. So I mean, to whatever you have to do, I feel like as a planner coming in, maybe it's who you associate with, what you take in terms of read or listen to. Just sort of maintain your integrity, so you're doing the thing that you can be proud of behind closed doors.
I love it. I love it.
Can't
I
add
like the
anything.
offline approach too.
Yeah.
Um, I completely agree with that, 100%. I guess another thing I would say is to be true to who you are and the things that you are really good at. I think there's so many planners trying to be everything to everyone. So many people trying to be an expert in event technology or an expert in design or an expert, but they're actually not interested in it at all. And I think that's okay. I think we can collaborate, and I think it's really good to push yourself to learn things that you don't already know. But I don't think we all have to be experts. It's a super competitive industry, clearly. Um, but I'd love to see the industry work together more and fight and compete less, and really embrace that there's a million roles in our industry, and if we all kind of stay in our lane and do what we're really good at and collaborate with the people who do things that we're not so good at, we can provide a much better quality experience for our attendees and sponsors and speakers and everyone else.
Awesome. Fantastic. I love your guys' approach. So on to our last question. We have only a couple minutes left. If you could pick, we already named a ton of new awesome resources, Dyson vacuum cleaner included. If you had one cool new resource, a couple new resources that you want to share, blogs, blog posts, books, gadgets, scuba masks, vacuum cleaners, anything that you guys want to share at all. What would you guys want to share out with the interwebs out there? Give me anything.
There's so many.
So
Um,
many.
I had a call with them today, so they're top of mind. I think it's a super cool platform, and we've talked to them a few times before. Storms, STORMZ. They are a facilitation platform, and it's the research and education mixed with the technology. So not just a platform for facilitating great conversations, but also the methodology around how to have a meaningful discussion. I think it's something worth checking out.
Storms. Cool. Ed, what about you? Any cool resources you have to share?
So I mean, my resource is not necessarily it's really not for your planning life, but as someone who does enjoy sort of like us going out and concerts. Something called Bands in Town. I just realized the other day how much I use it. It's called Bands in Town, and it'll integrate with the likes. So if you've liked the band on Facebook, or I think it probably does other social mediums as well. And I just find it so useful because whenever they are coming to your city, or at least near you, it'll let you know through these notifications. And I didn't realize, and because I didn't consider myself a big concert goer, but I realized last year I went to quite a few, and I would say 95% of them came because of that. And also, if there's like DJs that you follow, and and they use that platform, it's perfect for that. So as someone who if you need to like find out where things are going on, I just find Bands in Town's a really good resource for that.
I love Bands in Town too because I believe I might not, since they kind of got rid of the integration portion of it, but it integrates I think with Spotify too. So if you listen to a band enough on
Yeah.
Spotify or follow them, then that'll notify you too. So definitely a huge fan of Bands in Town for sure, especially when you listen. You're like a huge music fan. You have all these artists. You just never know when they're coming into town. Oh, wow. So an hour just flew by. That was absolutely amazing. What an amazing episode that we get to have our favorite event tech resource, TechsyTalk, on the show. We are just so excited to have you guys here today and talking a little bit about what you do, what got you to today, and the amazing event that you produce. So I got to give a huge shout out to Ed and Liz and give you a huge thank you for tuning in.
Thanks for having us.
We're so excited to have you. So, again, thanks to everyone for tuning in on the show. Catch us next week. We have an amazing show lined up next week as well. You just have to find out who it's going to be next week. And we look forward to having you guys all on the show again. And thank you again to Big Liz. And to big shout out to Mr. Ed, the Chief Unicorn. And we're just so excited to have you guys here. So we will catch you guys all next time on #Event Icons.
All right.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of #Event Icons. To catch the transcription and all of the resources mentioned, head to www.helloendless.com/blog. This week's episode will be posted and available by next Tuesday. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway and join the Twitter conversation sponsored by Alex Plaxton and Little Bird Told Media. Just tag your post with #Event Icons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #Event Icons.